This is Climate on the Edge, where we explore the frontier of climate interventions and dive into the bold ideas that could shape our planet's future. And I'm Susan Su.
We remove carbon from the atmosphere by sequestering organic waste deep underground in earthen vaults forever using slurry injection technology that came out of the oil and gas industry.
Hey everyone. I recently attended the Carbon Removal Capital Summit, a joint production between XPRIZE and the major global bank Santander. It was an awesome opportunity to get to flag down some pioneering XPRIZE finalists and hear more about their work. In this interview, I speak with Omar Abou-Sayed, co-founder and executive chairman of Valuted Deep. Valuted Deep takes liquid waste, aka the sludge that's not only toxic and you have to pay to get rid of it, but is also incredibly high emitting, and buries it through geologic sequestration for ultra-long duration carbon removal. I was super impressed with Omar's transition from oil and gas to essentially double solving open-ended waste. His ability to articulate the regulatory and financial engineering challenges for carbon removal, and his very personal why. Finally, I just love trash companies, and Vaulted is one of the most exciting takes on fixing externalities that I have ever come across. I hope you enjoyed this chat with Omar Abou-Sayed, co-founder and executive chairman of Valuted Deep.
I'm Omar Abou-Sayed. I am the co-founder and executive chairman of Valuted Deep.
Awesome. It's great to have you here, Omar. Great to meet you. I'm going to launch into the questions.
Okay.
So in one sentence, what does your company do?
We remove carbon from the atmosphere by sequestering organic waste deep underground in earthen vaults forever using slurry injection technology that came out of the oil and gas industry.
This is not on script, but don't you guys also just get rid of the worst possible stuff that's so hard to get rid of as part of this carbon removal benefit?
Yeah. So the best thing about our business model is we take wastes that are really truly end of life and are, but bring with them other problems. So some of the wastes we take are things like treated sewage sludge or manure or pulp and paper sludge, waste from those industries. These materials both have carbon stored in them that was stored by vegetation initially for free and then used in the economy multiple times before remaining resident in the waste. But along that journey, they pick up other things like pathogens like PFAS, viruses and bacteria like pharmaceutical compounds, acids. And we get the dual benefit of diverting this from most of these wastes end up land applied, landfilled, or worldwide discharged to waterways raw. And so you get this dual benefit of removing carbon and also eliminating the downstream effects of the waste ecosystem and the impacts it has on communities.
And increasingly, companies actually have to pay to get rid of this stuff, right? So now they're like potentially paying or getting paid.
Yeah. So there's some fraction of our waste that are already, I won't say articles of commerce, but are already a waste that has to be paid to be disposed of because of either regulation or something else. In those cases, we still have to reduce the price or compensate for the transport differential, both in terms of the economic impact, but also the carbon impact. But sadly, there are many of these wastes where there is no drive for someone to pay to dispose of them. So you can store in a lagoon next to your animal feedlot, you can store pig feces in an open lagoon and then spray it on the field nearby where it aerosolizes and it clings to people's clothes and people who live in the community have it in their soil. Those are wastes that people aren't having to pay for to dispose of today in a material way. And so the carbon economics allow us to give an incentive to someone to do something better than what they would normally do. And that's really the trick of the business model.
Yeah, waste logistics, man. The logistics part will get you though. Okay, so my next actual question is, what motivated you or your team to pursue this particular solution?
I'll be quick. I knew of this technology for many years because my father was one of the people who first invented it. The technology comes out of the oil and gas sector and it repurposes the geomechanical science behind hydraulic fracturing to allow solids to be deposited back underground for permanent storage. And it's used, and my dad and his team and his contemporaries invented it to clean up legacy oil field waste sites. And I had this idea 15 years ago that I could grow algae and use this technology and store algae underground and maybe make oil or certainly maybe remove carbon. What I found is back 15 years ago, there was no one who would pay us to do that. So there was no there for me to build a company around it. So I built a waste management company using that technology, and inside of it acquired some assets that work with organic waste, where we had in our mind as a team that we wanted to do some sort of carbon credits around it. And then I got introduced to my co-founder a couple years ago, and she came out of the carbon removal world, and she knew how we could apply what the technology was doing to a carbon market that would pay us. I'd had a couple attempts to do that and had hit some barriers. And so really it was when we came together that it unlocked the possibility of spinning this thing out into its own company and going to market with a carbon removal credit revenue as the organizing principle of the business.
Yeah, you really need a financial engineer on the carbon market side, right? Like people underestimate how much experience is really required to navigate that exactly.
And it's a community. The carbon removal universe is it's a growing market, but today it's a market of 1,000 buyers, let's say. And so branding really matters. Being known in that market, being a safe supplier to that market. When someone is voluntarily buying a carbon credit for their company, they don't want to take risk of their brand being negatively impacted because of your business practices or because you failed to deliver. And so there is a really high bar of knowledge that is required, a high bar of quality that's required to succeed in the market. And so we've been very cognizant of wanting to build that brand that is safe for our customers, that is high quality. When we say we're going to deliver something, it's based on, I would say we're not a science fair project. We don't need magic to happen to come down the cost curve. Like we have very known delivery points, and this technology is 30, 40 years was incubated and now being applied with some refinements to the space. But it really is about being well-known, being high quality, being able to be trusted in what we do.
Okay, next question. What is the biggest challenge you face in scaling your particular CDR solution, and how are you approaching it?
So our scaling challenge is very similar to a project developer's challenge, meaning we not only need to find the place where the resource is right, the subsurface resource in our case, but we need to do that in a place where there's enough waste to support the business, a broad enough waste shed to support the business, but also do it in a place where the regulations will let us permit. So we're not a tech startup that moves fast and break things. We are a company that gets permits and builds things. And there's a time horizon there that it takes to do that and do that in a compliant way. But that's also why we're so high quality. Going back to my earlier point, someone can sleep well at night knowing that it's not just their CDR team that has checked to make sure that what we're doing is not hurting the environment and is helping the environment, but there's an EPA regulator, a state regulator that sits on top of it. So our real path to scale is about acquiring those lands that exist, acquiring the right to use the land that exists within the areas where there's a waste shed and good regulatory, and/or working with regulators to get them to approve this sort of an operation.
So, Climate on the Edge is all about solutions that are really at the frontier of climate intervention. And to that end, I want to ask you, Omar, what do you believe is at the bleeding edge of carbon removal? For example, if you had a crystal ball, what breakthrough in CDR technology or policy do you think we might see in the next 15 years?
I will tie this back to my earlier response. I think Vaulted is coming to market with a technology that we brought out of oil and gas. Because we're applying it to a new market with a new business model, there's a lot of structure that has not yet been built around that for this to be a market of many lookalikes. And so I think in the next 10 years, we're going to see regulation begin to understand what these solutions can do. For example, our solution, I believe we'll get a classification of well that takes this question of regulatory outside of, does the state regulator think that they understand this well enough to apply it within their current, to shoehorn it into their current regulatory pathways, there will be a distinct pathway that comes out. And I think we'll see that for solution after solution, and that will lubricate the market adoption. I also think that the US is a fantastic incubator of technology. I worry that if we don't get the regulatory piece, that we will invent the technologies here that then go get scaled in places with faster to move governments. And so I think actually I'm heartened by the fact that in the US, our policymakers are realizing that there needs to be revision to how we permit things to be able to speed that up. So I think that is a massive unlock that over the next 10 years is going to change the face of what we can do with carbon.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Okay, second to last question. What has been the most surprising, unexpected discovery that you've made in your carbon removal journey?
What is the most unexpected thing I've learned in my carbon
And it can
journey?
be something super micro, it can be something big, it can be something very geeky.
I think for me, the thing I underappreciated, and this is why businesses should have co-founders. I think I underappreciated the dynamics of the voluntary carbon market and why there are certain trade-offs that have to be made for a voluntary buyer to feel comfortable making a purchase. And I think there were a lot of aha moments for me in understanding why, for example, we spun this out of the prior entity where we had incubated this idea so that it could be really laser focused on carbon removal, but also build a brand in carbon removal that wasn't part of a broader industrial go-to-market strategy. So I think there were a number of insights like that that were really valuable for me, given that I really understood this technology so well for so many years and had been thinking about using it for carbon removal. But it was those aha moments that are the things that got us past the barriers to actual deployment in this market.
Okay, since you mentioned it, I've got to ask, what is an example of one of those trade offs that buyers are wrestling with?
I think that if we were coming to market, so Vaulted was spun out of the prior entity I founded. That entity does a lot of work with oil and gas industry. It's a technology that came out of oil and gas. It is a net positive in that it is reducing a lot of environmental harm that would arise from drilling and production activities that were going to happen in the absence of us doing the right thing. But I think that is a hard brand to buy from if you are in the voluntary carbon market. So we split it out. We raised money specifically into Vaulted. We have an independent board. It's its own company. And so I think we out-licensed the technology from the prior company into this one. It is its own business. And I think that allows us to get the benefit and stand on the shoulders of the giants who, like my father and his colleagues, who deployed and developed this great technology, but to deploy it now for carbon removal in a way that's safe for our buyers.
Okay, my very last question for you, Omar. A lot of people working in climate have the luxury of ignoring the very physics based realities that are part of your every single day. Given that, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope is I'm running a company that isn't relying on some invention we cannot today understand to make us cost competitive with what humanity needs to pay for carbon removal to be able to afford the trade-offs that need to be made for climate. So I think I have a luxurious position in that this technology, we know it, we know our costs. We've been doing this for decades now. But I think what really gives me hope beyond the fact that my starting position at Vaulted, when I look around and I see a generation of smart people deciding that this is the mission of their careers, they're taking less pay, they are taking big risks when they can in their careers. And I see all of that talent being pulled into this market. That gives me a lot of hope because if you get we basically have a whole generation of the smartest engineers and the smartest business people have decided, no, I'm going to go make my money in saving the world from climate change. It's going to happen. And I'll tell you why I believe that. The biggest movements that have been made around climate happened as the Gen X began to take the helm of power in the global economy from the baby boomers. And why is that? It's because Gen X grew up with climate change taught in earth science as a matter of fact. It's not controversial. And then you have the millennial generation who combine that sort of fundamental belief in the problem we're trying to solve, that it's a real problem, with kind of the energy and enthusiasm of that large generation. All of the progress we're seeing is being driven at the pace that generations enter the workforce. And so the bias of the current generations coming to the workforce to not just believe in climate, but believe in the morality and the importance of taking less for myself so that I can do something better for the world. That's what's going to need, because this generation of leaders are now taking over the economy, taking over, becoming heads of state, becoming CEOs of big businesses, starting really valuable companies, making investment decisions. I think that tells me the economy is really realigning on this.
Yeah, as well as becoming parents and teachers. Thank you so much, Omar. Great answers. Loved speaking with you. That was
My pleasure.
awesome.
Pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Climate on the Edge. If you liked this episode, please subscribe to the show and consider dropping us a 5-star rating and review. You can also follow us on social media so you never miss an update. Climate on the Edge is brought to you by Emergence, innovative minds exploring climate's next frontier. Thanks again for tuning in. See you next time.